Hello, welcome to a very special episode of Cotton. And today I have my guest is Professor Aditya Nigam, who is with Center for Developing Societies in Delhi. He's an author, he's an activist, and
Now I'm retired.
and
Now
now you
I'm
are
retired.
now
Retired
you are
from CSDS.
Okay, you have retired from the CSC, but you are intellectually very active, and your book has come only recently, isn't it? Uh,
Yes,
Decolonizing the theory. Yeah.
yes,
So
yes.
I welcome you to this
Thank you.
discussion,
Thank you.
and I want to discuss with you because I have been following your writings on the Facebook. I have been following your Facebook post, and I've seen how we have been seeing the development in Bangladesh. Now,
Right.
actually, how is the situation at the moment? How do you see it?
Well, actually, right now it's a fluid situation, and my point on this would be, uh, if we look at the past, so many movements during the 21st century, starting with the various Arab Springs, Tunisia, Egypt, or other places, and then finally even Sri Lanka. Everywhere up to this point, it was fine, right? The transition was where the real problem was. What happens after the power is overthrown? That happened in Sri Lanka also. It almost for so many few days, there was nobody to take power. I mean, Gotabaya abdicated. People were having fun in the presidential palace, but there was nobody to take over power. I think in Bangladesh, what has happened is that the whole and I think this for this entire Bangladesh society and civil society's role is very important, that they anticipated, and that the transition has to be steered. So that is why, starting from the University Teachers Network to various other organizations, individuals, they have actually tried to work out a transition plan in which this whole thing of an interim government, elections within a short span or under the supervision of an interim national government type of thing, uh, which has at one level happened. All the doomsday predictions about Islamic takeover, this, that, or military rule and so on are not correct. In fact, the key military head, I'm forgetting his name, who is supposed to be also Sheikh Hasina's relative, he was escaping because he realized he's not got that support in the army now. He wanted to escape to the Emirates or somewhere. So, in that sense, this is a very positive situation. And in additionally, I'm getting news from my friends in Dhaka that they are actually, the students are doing all-night vigils, because right now the formal security, the forces of the state have not taken responsibility yet. And this is a time when all kinds of miscreants can come. The first day there was some attempt at attacking some Hindu temples. Very quickly it was controlled. But there have been some incidents like this. And so the students are now doing vigils outside Hindu religious temples and minority areas, but also generally for dakat, the dakat of people who get active in a situation when there is no law and order. And just today morning, in fact, one of my friends sent me a short clip of them. They are now even using drones to track and see if everything, in the vicinity and so on is okay. So they're kind of doing that. This is in itself very, very interesting. But the disconcerting part is that all the young people who made the revolution, and this is one thing which is a sore point, that all the young people who gave their lives and made the revolution possible, when the time has come now for an interim government and later whatever shape it takes, a lot of them feel that it's the same old gerontocracy. There is only one woman representative in the list which is circulating, so it's not finalized and so on. And I don't want to talk about the composition because as an Indian, it is not good for me to talk about what shape it will take. These are all these very issues about India are very, very sensitive. And Indians talking should always be a little bit more self-reflexive when talking about things like this. But what they are saying, the youth there, is that this is not, if it is not quickly rectified, they are not giving up on it, they are not making a negative reaction, but they are critical. They are critical that this is not going to work and this will get back all the old forces if you don't get representative of the mobilized youth and students on board.
Okay.
So in that sense, a dual.
Okay. Now, two things actually. There are two parts, two things I want to discuss with you. First thing is that, okay, what is the present situation? As you have already said that, okay, students, they are still in command. They are trying to control the situation. Other forces who are trying to take benefit of the situation. Definitely many people, many political parties, outfits, they will try to benefit from the situation. But then students who actually led this movement, so they are sort of in command over the situation at the moment, and they are trying to control the situation, which is actually a very good thing. And particularly someone, I am an Indian, you are an Indian. When we speak about the situation in a country, outside country, in a foreign country, I think we should be very careful and cautious before making sweeping comments. And I have seen, actually, this is for the first time that actually I'm taking this interview with you. I have been trying to get some people from Bangladesh, but somehow it is not materializing. I could understand they are also very busy, hectic things are going on. So, two things. One is that actually how do you describe the tenure of Hasina, Begum Hasina? And last 3 terms, she was the government, she was the head of the government, she was the prime minister. And people say that, okay, during her time, there was uh, economic development took place, there was economic prosperity. But then the democracy, democratic rights, freedom of expression, dissent, all those things were brutally controlled. So, how do you? I would like to hear something from you about that. First, about that before we came to the agitation part.
Yes, yes. Now, actually, the thing is, also let me clarify for your audience also that I'm not a Bangladesh expert in the way in which there are area studies experts or security studies experts. I am kind of more interested in as a neighboring South Asian country, and my interest is also in looking at the movement part of it. But the thing is that about this Sheikh Hasina regime, uh, it is not very surprising that in terms of the standard indicators of development, which standard meaning the neoliberal indicators, some growth and development has taken place, and which has had some effect in terms of which is if it actually happens in a uh, at least in the initial phase, like it happened in India also, there is a lot of pent up demand. There are demand for new goods, new industries, therefore, and so on and so forth. So there is always a little bit of possibility there for economic development and little bit of prosperity to happen. Though how well it will be shared through the whole of the population is a different matter. Now, there, I think that there is also another aspect. I just yesterday, I was reading a friend's post, very fascinating, which asked, no, not yesterday, this is a day before yesterday. So just the day after Hasina left. And said, have any of you been to the market? The onion which was selling at 80 taka is now selling at 50. And something else, so he gave a list of 3-4 things. And he said, when I asked the vendor, how come it has become cheap? So he said, earlier we had to give the cut, we had to give the hafta also. So that was also included in the price. So now there is no cut. As long as the state agencies don't come and reimpose their thing and the whole old pattern starts, this is an interregnum in which actually they are able to function. So it was
That's
a very
quite
eye-opening
interesting.
state.
That's quite interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Very
relief to the
eye-opening.
common people.
Yes. So now the thing is that that part of Hasina's regime is acknowledged, and obviously I'm not going to go into the details of the what the position of different poorer sections is, but the sense of being looted all around. I mean, Bangladesh probably has the most had the most what should I say, the most brazen kind of corruption, not just, of course, at the top echelons, which were never investigated and so on, but even Sheikh Hasina herself at one point said that he was just a peon, now he's going around in helicopters about something.
Yes.
So
I read that.
this is so this is the kind of impression that common people was also having, that actually we are being looted all around. There are these group of people around Sheikh Hasina and the core of the Awami League who have made tons and tons and tons of money and who are looting the common people. So that was one level at which it, I think, the economic part operates. But the political part is, I think, the more serious one, because last 3 elections are openly seen to be as stolen elections, if not open dacoity. At least it's seen, but entire opposition is under arrest here. And the thing is that it is so, opposition is under arrest, the elections are manipulated and whatever. And ultimately, in the last election, I was told the percentage of people who managed to vote was only 5 to 8%. More than 90% people didn't vote. Partly because so that is one part. The other part is this attack on any kind of government opposition to the government. So one of the reasons, for example, for this student upsurge is that the Chhatra League terror in the colleges and universities was something they had to live on a daily basis. And so the anger there was very high. So people, I'm told, you even had to, even if you wanted to get a residential seat in a hostel, you had to please the Awami League, Chhatra League leaders. And then, which means that whenever they had a demonstration, you had to go to the Chhatra League demonstration, you had to participate in Chhatra League activities as if to increase their numbers and show that you are with them. And routine beating up of opponents and disappearances and all. Now, disappearances is another factor. Now, I don't know, you must have seen these Ainaghar photographs which have come out.
Yes.
A few of the disappeared people have returned after like 10 years.
10 years.
For
they
10
saw
years,
light after 10 years.
And for 10 years, people didn't know they're dead or alive. Their family members didn't know. It's not like you are under arrest and therefore you have to be produced in a court of law. Yes, Umar Khalid did not get bail for 1500 days. We know all that. But at least we know he is alive. We know he has to be routinely produced in the court. We can see something is there. Here, there are like people who have been 8 years, 10 years in those dungeons. They are actually like dungeons. Yeah. And now, after the regime has fallen, they are coming back. I think this whole thing has accumulated into a kind of resentment against the Awami League, which is in political terms. So they call it fascist. Most of the opponents of the regime call it fascist. I won't say fascist in that sense because, of course, it has now become a very loose term which we keep using. But yes, there are kind of proto-fascist tendencies in the regime where it comes to dealing with the opposition and dissent. And that, I think, became one of the key issues why the rebellion started.
Can I intervene here? And what about the institutions? About the institutions, say court of law and other institutions.
See, my sense is court of law situation when it comes to direct confrontation with the government is pretty bad. I mean, it's like ours. This on the quota question, for example, after the 2018 movement, Sheikh Hasina realized that the movement had got too big and she couldn't avoid the thing. So in parliament, in a dramatic gesture, she said, okay, you want quota removed, all quota removed. Now, students were asking only for quota reform. They were not asking for removal of all quota. But this drama was then backed up by this appeal to the High Court, which finally this 5th of June, they reversed the parliament order, the decision. And so in a way reinstated the decision, which was what the Awami League wanted actually. This was what they wanted. That drama was a momentary thing to contain the force of the movement. And this Supreme Court also what it did now by saying, okay, now we reduce it to like 5% or something. So 92% or 93% will be on open merit and so on. This also is very arbitrary and obviously is going to leave many sections discontented and with the possibility of always turning it against the agitation things. So, but my other sense is from and this again is what I gather from a lot of some media reports and friends who generally are in the know of things, that because so much of it was happening under the law or behind the law. I mean, the beatings or disappearances that were happening in the universities, the disappearances that were happening taken to Ainaghar and things, those kind of things. That so much of this was actually at a level where there's no formal arrest. There's no formal legal proceedings in which you can actually test the institutions. I think universities seem to be still in a better shape. There's some kind of sense, I think, that the universities have managed critical space and education has been relatively like or largely not controlled by the government in that sense. I mean, the critical intelligence is quite important in Bangladesh in that way.
Okay. Now, another thing, one thing, and particularly it actually falls in your domain. And your domain means that, okay, we normally what do we do? We try to implement the Western theories in our country. And you are someone who is actually trying to see that how. I remember one thing once, actually, when I was working with National Book Trust. There's a great author, Panisharnath Renu. So
Yes, yes.
at the blurb of the book, something was written like this, that okay, you need to have a different kind of, it's a critical approach to understand Pranishanath Renu. And somehow that particular sentence stayed with me. And now when I come to understanding, actually discussing these things, that okay, you need to develop a special apparatus to understand the specific conditions of a particular situation, particular thing. Now, so that is why discussing this thing with you is very important, in the sense that okay, how here is Bangladesh, a third world country, and you know the history of Bangladesh, how it has come into existence, and now there is a student movement, a very intense student movement. And how do we read this? How do we read this student movement? How do we read the meaning of this student movement? That's very important, because people, what we have been hearing, and you are consistently you are writing about that, that okay, we are trying to see through our own prism of understanding. We are not trying to actually locate it in its own space. So, how do you react to it, and what is your understanding? That's very important.
No, interesting question. But right now, I think so in a more general sense, if I would say, the problem with South Asia, or so I'm not taking each of these countries separately, but even the global South in particular, in general, uh, one of the difficulties is that we are continuously measuring ourselves in terms of a certain kind of standard which has been set for us. And so when you ask anybody about uh, who's like trained in social sciences, and Western theory obviously is the basis of all these social sciences, uh, the answers we usually get are like our democracy is incomplete, our modernity is distorted, our secularism is out of shape, and things like that. Whatever we try to do, we are actually always falling short because we are not able to make ourselves like them. And I think the biggest tragedy of all our societies in South Asia is that that is what we are measuring ourselves against. I'm not saying we shouldn't be democratic. That's not my point. My point is that when you think of democracy in those terms and try to measure it like that, or you think of secularism. Secularism is a very good example because actually uh, in our countries it is simply not applicable in that sense, because in the West, the whole secularism thing comes out of a context where the church was totally fused with state power. Here, there is actually no instance of that even during, so 1000 years of Mughal rule before, Mughal or Sultanate rule before this, it was not a Sharia state. The society was Hindu, there were Muslim rulers coming, and not all of them were Muslim. There was also Hindu kingdoms in between. The Hindu kingdoms had relationships with the Mughals and the Sultanate. It was actually a completely different picture here. We never had that kind of a thing. And from the time of Ashoka, which now we all have access to all that. So 3rd century BC onwards, you have this various ways in which indigenous rulers tried to spell out ways of co-living, which doesn't deny your religiosity. And moreover, that religiosity was never part of the state apparatus. So when you suddenly see madrasa students guarding a Hindu temple in some places of Bangladesh, you find it unbelievable, right? If you are tutored to think in terms of Western secularism, you cannot think of people who have very clearly identifiable religious features. You cannot think of them as secular. In our country, I think to a certain extent, we've got used to the Sikhs because that is a community which you always see with turban and things and so on, males. But so that is one kind of way in which when we identify these different elements. So there, the question of let's say democracy. Now, at one level, yes, democracy about civil rights, about freedom of speech, and these things, these are, I would say, more universal questions. These are not questions which are specifically of Western relevance only. But when we think of democracy as something which has to be thought only in terms of the abstract citizen, who is unmarked without any identity, religious or otherwise. In India, it is caste. That is simply not possible, because from the time of Ambedkar, we've had this debate in the Constituent Assembly, and finally the whole business of reservation was put through with the argument that you cannot have abstract citizenship. That there are these historical discriminations which have to be, the safeguards for which have to be provided. And if that means you have differentiate between citizens, if that means you have to ensure a certain kind of safeguard for the historically disadvantaged, then so be it. Similarly, with the question of minority rights and so on, these are things which came to the West much later. All the multiculturalism and things which West developed in the 80s and later, we had debated much of that in our in the context of India and the Constituent Assembly, but during the anti-imperialist struggle also, anti-colonial struggle.
Now, because as we have time constraint, now these
Right.
things have spread out so much. Now,
Yes, it has got spread out.
yeah, coming specifically to the Bangladesh situation and the
Yeah.
students' movements, how would you like to define the the basic characteristics of this movement, this agitation?
So that's, I think, directly related in a way to your earlier question.
Yes, yes.
Which is, yeah, because I think the interesting part of this whole movement, it is so widespread, it was so, went deep into Bangladesh society, the amount of energy generated. But within the movement, there are Islamists, there are leftists, there are all kinds of people who are there, which in their party frames, they would not have come together. The old ideological frames of the 20th century. And this is where I think somewhere we have broken. And this particular movement, I think, seems to show a way outside of the formal politics of parties, which is one way in which the whole Western idea of democracy has been defined. You have parties, you have party competitions, and everything is very tightly controlled by those party formations. Very specific to this situation and very interesting about this movement in particular is that they are not constrained by any of those shibboleths. So, and so many of the people who died are Hindu. I mean, I was reading the list of the people who were killed in the first lot, 2,209 people in the first, before 2nd of August. So many of those people who were killed were Hindu also. So there are Hindus, there are Muslims, there are leftists of various kinds. They're all working together without any.
So I think it is a very colorful combination of student communities and other people who were very specific about their, you see, there were their rights, freedom of expression, and who were against this say sort of fascist regime. Can we come?
Yes.
Can we say that?
Yes, and I think in a way in which we in the subcontinent understand unity in diversity, that there is all kind of diverse things, but there is some way in which we find common ground.
So we got, these people got a common ground, and they actually followed that principle throughout the agitation. And I think more than 200 students actually were killed in this agitation.
In the official count before 2nd of August. After 2nd of August, another 100 or odd were killed. And unofficial reports, in one AFP report said 1100 or something.
So now so many people actually sacrificed their life for this freedom, for this struggle. Now, because the time is coming down, I could see there's only 10 minutes left, 8 minutes left.
Right.
Now, coming to there are two very major questions. One is that how, after this thing, how do you see the India-Bangladesh relationship?
That's a really difficult question. Look, I think actually the new regime will be favorable to better relations. I think nobody wants tension in their background, but there are things which have to be negotiated. And these are things, so what part the old history of Islamism, this, that, etc., or Jamaat-e-Islami and Pakistan and all that, if India is a little prepared, it has to show that it has prepared to take the new regime on its terms and put the old baggage aside. Then I think there is a lot of possibility of a good relationship, but the concrete material questions which have to be negotiated, where I think it is not just the regime in Delhi, but also the Trinamool Congress regime in Bengal. What sharing of river waters is absolutely a big bone of contention. And as Professor Anu Muhammad of Jahangirnagar University puts it, that this is actually one of the key basis of that can only be the United Nations Convention on Water Sharing, which India has not ratified, but even Bangladesh had not ratified under Sheikh Hasina. So if now, if we just imagine that if Bangladesh and West Bengal had been the same state, would you have been able to stop their water? You are now doing it only because it's a separate nation state. What is this nonsense? So the thing is that this is a matter which has to be seriously dealt with. We can't solve these problems inside India, and we are also not solving them in the international arena. I think that is not going to work. If some of these things can be sorted out on the basis of putting aside your old baggage, if they go around with the same old baggage that Awami League and Sheikh Hasina was their loyal ally, and these are the people who are all going to be like Pakistani agents and Chinese agents, then there is very little chance. And with this regime in New Delhi, I am not very hopeful that they are, ready to look without blinkers.
So you think that actually this Trinamool Congress, this Bengal, has a great role in it. Now, another thing actually I want your views that actually as Indians, the people who are outside Bangladesh, now how should we view these things? I have seen people making sweeping comments, all kinds of things. So I've got some sense of it from your Facebook post, but here, for the greater audience, I want you to speak it out articulately. That as someone outsider, you are an Indian, I am an Indian. Now, I have seen many people, many organizations actually making sweeping comments on the developments in Bangladesh, which is, I don't think is a justified thing.
No, not. I think I mean absolutely. I agree with what you're saying, because look, first thing is I think that people make whatever change of regime, whether they do it through elections or through a revolutionary overthrow, because there is no. I mean, if the elections had not been rigged, this would have happened through elections. This doesn't have to be like this. It has become a situation where 3 elections consecutively are being rigged. And so there is no option and people do that. Now, when people do that, then you sit and make pass judgment on them. They did not change the regime for your benefit or my benefit. They did it because of them. That is their problem. They are addressing their problem. And the way in which so much irresponsible commentary, especially from a section of the secular radical intelligentsia in Bengal, I'm quite amazed that it has actually, they have, I mean, looks like they are also trained to think like a state, that they're only thinking in terms of geopolitics. They are not thinking that the people of Bangladesh they have also some agency. They have also some, they are not just jumping into it because somebody is,
Instigating them, somebody is instigating them. And here, and
every time it is like, yeah, sorry.
Strangely, there is some similarity here among the Hindu people and also the so-called the whom we call liberals and secular people.
It has become no total convergence in at least
I'm surprised.
Absolutely, because the way the BJP campaign is going about Islamic and now Bangladesh will become another Pakistan, the way our Godi media is going about it, and the way these secularists are going about it, there's no difference. They are all talking of it as if some calamity has happened. And that calamity it is because now Pakistan is going to take over or something like that. There is absolutely I mean, I am amazed to find that these people who call themselves secular or left or whatever, they are talking identical language with the BJP is doing.
That is what I have seen. That is what I have seen. But okay, so I think we should behave more responsibly and we should give respect and dignity to the sacrifices of the students. So
and to their decision, whatever they decide, yeah.
So Professor Nigam, I'm so happy that actually we could exchange our ideas. Okay, we both are from India, but still,
thank you. We also met for the first time.
Yeah, I'll come back to you again more on the theories on South Asia, India, and things. Thank you very much for
Thanks a lot.
Sparing time to be my guest.
No, not at all. It's my pleasure. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
We'll continue this dialogue and discussion. Thank you very much.
Certainly.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.